So what this is going to be basically is me kind of giving a paper on the paper that I have for you guys today. The second paper I mentioned is something that I'm going to make available at the end of this, but it's not very readable, so I couldn't really do a reading. I'm going to try and read parts of it, but I don't really know how to. So with that said, I'm just going to tell you basically like what I was trying to do for this, and I'll show you the results. I'll make it available at the end. So yeah, I think actually what I was trying to do in this piece is actually similar to what just happened, only I'm using like text text, and not sounds necessarily. So yeah, so what I was trying to do was I have been reading a lot of things, as people do, and I was trying to figure out if I can track the process of some object that was meaningful, that I could understand, to the point where it was beyond that. So where maybe it only made sense formally and I didn't necessarily understand the content of that. So I wanted to see if I could record that interval between those two moments, if that makes sense. Other ways other people have described this are, the acting upon itself. That's a term that Ray Brassier has described when he's talking about improvisation. I think another way that people, like a lot of philosophers have talked about this, is any type of like absolute in itself thing, or thinking towards non-thought. And I think we were talking about the word non before. It's actually different than unthought. It's non-thought, because it's not necessarily just not thought, it's not. So anyways, so that's what I was trying to do. So like I was trying to do a really specific thing for this. And the text that I compiled for this, in order to do this, were some of the following, actually all the following that I'm going to read. I'm going to read very short excerpts of each so you can get maybe a taste of what's going on. I don't want to leave you completely in the dark here. So yeah, the first text that I incorporated into this, basically what I did with all these texts was I compiled them into one space on the screens that I had, on a Google Doc, and I just undid all the margins so I don't have any margins. I just kind of compressed everything into one space so I have a fat field of words. Anyways, what a phrase. The first text is from Text for Nothing by Beckett, and it's Text for Nothing number 8. And I have a small portion to read for you. I'm just going to pick randomly, so, okay. I'll know I'm silence, no. In the silence you can't know. I'll never know anything. But at least get out of here, at least that, no. I don't know. And time begin again, the steps on the earth, the night the fool implores at morning, and the morning he begs at evening not to dawn. I don't know what all that means, day and night, earth and sky, begging and imploring. And I can desire them, who says I desire them? The voice, and that I can't desire anything. That looks like a contradiction, it may be for all I know. Okay. The next text up was Derrida on Différance, which I'm sure you guys know. I'm just going to read a bit of it. Oh, and I picked all these texts because I thought they were more or less trying to do a similar thing, describe a similar thing that I am trying to do. So yeah, pick a random spot on this. Let us begin again. Difference is what makes the movement of signification possible only if each element that is said to be present, appearing on the stage of presence, is related to something other than itself but retains the mark of a past element and already lets itself be hollowed out by the mark of its relation to a future element. This trace relates no less to what is called the future than to what is called the past, and it constitutes what is called the present by this very relation to what it is not, to what it absolutely is not, that is, not even to a past or future considered as a modified present. In order for it to be, an interval must separate it from what it is not. but the interval that constitutes it in the present must also, and by the same token, divide the present in itself, thus dividing along with the present everything that can be conceived on its basis, that is, every being in particular for our metaphysical language, the substance or subject. The next text I have is Haeckel from the Phenomenology of the Spirit, and he's talking about negation here. Self-consciousness is primarily simple being by itself, self-identity by exclusion of every other from itself. It takes its essential nature and absolute object to be ego, and in this immediacy, in this bare fact of its self-existence, it is individual. That which for it is the other stands as unessential object, as object with the impress and character of negation. But the other is also a self-consciousness. An individual makes its appearance in antithesis to an individual. Appearing thus in their immediacy, they are for each other in the manner of ordinary objects. They are independent individual forms, modes of consciousness that have not risen above the bare level of life. They are, moreover, forms of consciousness which have not yet accomplished for one another the process of absolute abstraction, of uprooting all immediate existence, and of being merely the bare negative fact of self-identical consciousness, or, in other words, have not yet revealed themselves to each other as existing purely for themselves, i.e., as self-consciousness. The next text I have is from an excerpt of Ray Brassier's book, Nihil Unbound. And he's talking about nihilism, obviously, but he's talking about nihilism through Badiou. So here's a short portion. As far as nihilism is concerned, we shall grant that our era bears witness to it precisely insofar as nihilism is understood as the rupturing of the traditional figure of the bond, unbinding as the form of being of everything which acts as a semblance of the bond. That everything that is bound testifies that it is unbound in its being, that the reign of the multiple is, without exception, the groundless ground of what is presented, that the one is merely the result of transitory operations. These are the ineluctable consequences of the universal placement of the terms of our situation within the circulatory movement of the general monetary equivalent. Oh God, that was not heavy. Let me kind of skip. This isn't out of the context, the quote already taken out of context, so it's Brassier saying something Badiou said about something Badiou said, and now he's talking about capitalism, so I'm just going to skip. Let's read a summary of that. In order to be equal to desecrating abstractions of modernity, philosophy must abjure any attempts to sanctify being in the figure of the bond. Thus, it is not enough to denounce the hypostasization of being in the myth of presence. It is a phenomenological myth of presencing itself which must be deposed. The discourse of ontology must be disenchanted by being handed over to mathematical science. Accordingly, in the introduction to Being an Event, Badiou, I'm not going to even read that, so that's portion for that. He's going to quote Badiou again, so. Next portion, unfortunately, I guess I could try. The next text I had was from Fred Moten's lecture entitled Blackness and Non-Performance. I don't think I have anything I don't have a transcription that I can read, although I did transcribe the lecture for this. It's not going to happen, sorry. The next text I have is it's actually online comments on Wittgenstein's Tractata number 6.4, I think, and like that's one where he's talking, he's doing all this shit, and then he's like, if I don't know something, I remain silent. And there are two comments that I found online of that I kind of took for this apparatus as well. The next text is, I couldn't really avoid this, Deleuze from A Thousand Plateaus. and he's talking about the body without organs. And I'll read some really short portion of this. The body without organs is what remains when you take everything away. What you take away is precisely the fantasy and signifiances and subjectifications as a whole. Psychoanalysis does the opposite. It translates everything into fantasies. It converts everything into fantasy. It retains a fantasy. It royally botches the real because it botches the body without organs. And then I took a portion of Kant from the Critique of Pure Reason, and he's talking here about the necessity of a scientific philosophy to get knowledge that's a priori. I really don't want to read this. I'll just read a very short portion. These inevitable problems of pure reason itself are God, freedom, and immortality. The science which with all its apparatus is really intended for the solution of these problems is called metaphysic. Its procedure is at first dogmatic, i.e. unchecked by a previous examination of what reason can and cannot do before it engages confidently in so arduous an undertaking. And then after that, I don't really have something that I can read from this either. It was a transcription of another thing that Brassier did. It was a lecture on him talking about Heidegger, Deleuze, and death. It's like very difficult. It's like really difficult to understand if you ever watch. It's like available on YouTube for free, easy consumption. I actually transcribed my notes on that for this thing. Yeah. Next text I had was Zizek. He wrote an essay called Love Beyond Law, and he's basically just talking about Lacan, because Zizek. So, Love Beyond Law involves a feminine sublimation of drives into love. As Bruce Fink emphasizes again and again, love is here no longer merely a narcissistic misrecognition to be opposed to desire as the subject's truth, but a unique case of direct asexual sublimation, integration into the order of a signifier of drives of their jouissance in the guise of the asexual thing, music, religion, etc., experienced in the ecstatic surrender. What one should bear in mind of this love beyond law, this direct asexual sublimation of drive, is that it is inherently nonsensical beyond meaning. Meaning can only take place within the symbolic law. The moment we trespass the domain of law, meaning changes into enjoyment. Then the next thing I have, I don't have an excerpt of this either, but I can sum it up pretty easily. It's a discussion between a bunch of people who think, and they're talking about Bergson and his use of the word creativity. And the two people who I have kind of transcribed what they have said in discussion with one another is Catherine Malibu, I think her last name is, and then again Ray Brassier, and they're just arguing about, it's just like vitalism versus anti-vitalism. So one of them's like, but life isn't art, blah, blah, blah. And Ray Brassier is just like, no, it isn't, that's stupid. And he's like ruthlessly destroying her argument as he does. Yeah, basically Brassier just says that the word creativity is, when Bergson uses it, it's just a gap in his thinking. It's like him saying, whoa, creativity. It doesn't really mean anything. He's not explaining experience. So it's like a useless term. So yeah. The next thing I have, I don't have an excerpt of either, is Bataille from The System of Non-Knowledge. And he's just talking about like the sun and stuff like that. Like sneezing. The next thing I actually have is an analysis I did of a really important moment in a Bach piano concerto. I don't really know how to read that to you because I don't have piano and I don't want to play it either, but it's just an analysis. So it's like a Roman numeral analysis, and then also like, I don't know how do you, like, in the way you would analyze jazz or something, so it doesn't use like the Roman numerals anymore, it just uses like letters. And then it's also it's also like a counterpoint analysis, and it's also tracking the sort of solmization, the like do re mi fa so's loss. So yeah. And the last thing I have, last text I use, is this random thing I ran into on Wikipedia about the Planck length, and I thought it was interesting because I didn't understand what it was saying. So yeah, and this the visualization portion. They try to visualize this to you, and in doing that, it becomes really inaccessible, at least to me. So it reads, the size of the Planck length can be visualized as follows. If a particle or dot about 0.005 millimeter in size, which is the same size as a small grain of silt, were magnified in size to be as large as the observable universe, then inside that universe-sized dot, the Planck length would be roughly the size of an actual 0.005 millimeter dot. In other words, a 0.005 millimeter dot is halfway between the Planck length and the size of the observable universe on a logarithmic scale. All said, the attempt to visualize to an arbitrary scale of 0.005 millimeter dot is only for a hinge point. With no fixed frame of reference for time or space, where the spatial units shrink towards infinitesimally small spatial sections and time stretches toward infinity, scale breaks down. Inverted, where space is stretched and time is shrunk, the scale adjusts the other way according to the ratio v squared over c squared. So yeah, those are all the texts I collected. Then after that, I had a lot of text. So what I did in one way or another was basically transcribe it and then put it on one document. And I squished everything as much as I could. So it was really just a string of words, smallish font, single size spacing, like as little white space as I could possibly get. And then after that, I had the real issue, the problem with this was I was gonna transform that material in some way, and I had a second portion of the apparatus that I was working on that I had to somehow reconcile with this like field of words that I had. And I'm gonna also make this available to look at because I don't know how to describe it to you well without redrawing it. I also, it's kind of illegible to me, although I did do it myself. So yeah, this second part of what I was working on, within that I'm also trying to reconcile two things, which is two diagrams or spatializations of concepts that Beckett again is talking about in film, and then Kant is talking about in the Critique of Pure Reason again in another section. And in the Beckett, I guess I could also leave this here, but he's the diagram that informs all the actions that are going on in film is like a triangle that looks like this. And on one side of it, there's some point that Beckett identifies as point O, and then on the other side, it's point E. And basically throughout the entire thing, point O and point E are moving in a way that is trying to be so that point O can't see point E following it directly. So like, if you went like this with your hand, it works, I promise. And like, what is the hang loose thing? And you kind of close one eye. If your thumb and your pinky are perfectly aligned, you can't see your pinky. So he describes like, you know, what the shape is here, like he describes it as like a 45-degree angle here. And then like, I don't know, if he has that one diagram. If you move your thumb a little bit, you can see your pinky, and basically that's what Beckett's trying to not make happen during the whole thing. And he describes, the way he draws it makes sense, but it's basically like a 45-degree triangle to a 46-degree triangle, and if the 46-degree triangle happens, point O can recognize point E as existing. But then like in the end, point O and point E are the same person, so it's like crazy. Anyways. So yeah, so I have that diagram, then I also had like an implied diagram in something Kant was talking about, and he was talking about the difference between synthetic judgment and analytical judgment. And he's basically describing how, I think I didn't mess these up, but I don't think I swapped them, but he's talking about how an analytical judgment is the process of acquiring information that doesn't rely on any external reference to make sense of. Whereas synthetic judgment, you have to rely on an external reference, and that's the type of reasoning we're most familiar with. So like, an example of that, I think, if I'm not switching the terms, is like, I wouldn't put my face in a hot oven, not because I had to do it to know so, but because like I hurt my hand on some hot water before, like from inference, from me remembering an experience that was outside of this one thing, I was able to know that I probably shouldn't do that. So yeah, that diagram looked like, for analytical judgment, it looked like a circle, and then let's say A and B, or like subject and predicate, were both within the same circle, and all the information flow was within that circle. There was no external thing that had to go on. And then for synthetic judgment, A was in the circle, the subject, and in order to get information from its predicate, it had to go outside of the arbitrary circle that had formed around it. So it was like, if this is a circle, it was like they were like here now, A and B. So yeah, I really wanted to somehow, first I needed to reconcile those two diagrams, and then I needed to reconcile those two diagrams with the text that I had in the first place. And I somehow found a way to do that with, I'm going to try and explain it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, so I'm going to leave the thing here, because it's just like geometry, I guess. It's not very exciting, but it helped me figure out something. So yeah, basically what I was able to do was somehow change the two circles I had to two triangles that looked really similar to the Beckett diagram. Then all I had to do was like a series of reflections and like slight transformations, like geometry, and I was able to like re-realize the Kant and Beckettian, Beckett-esque terms spatially. Okay, so after that, I had to deal with the huge collection of text that I had, and this is where a lot of the problems began. So the first thing I tried to do with this was really not that great. So what I tried to do was, I had a shape basically, and I was like, well, how do I realize this shape in text, in another text? And what I did was I basically, the first like 5 things that I tried to do with it were just me tracing with the diagram onto the text that I had, and it wasn't bad, but it was pretty boring, because nothing is it when you trace in any type of way, you get a one-to-one like input-output relationships, like nothing happens. Yeah, I don't know how else to explain that, because we never really actually, like, if you can think of something being literally repeated, I don't know how you could think about that. Like, there's no difference between the first thing and the second thing. Like, there's no mistake, there's no, like, it's just boring. It doesn't, there's no experimentation there. So yeah, the first thing I tried to do was I literally just tried to trace those lines in the text. So my first iteration of the text would look like that shape, just with letters, like those those poems that are like the letters. But I thought that was dumb, so I figured out something else to do, and what I actually ended up doing to get to what I'll be showing you later on today is actually figuring out what transformations happen for me to realize the Kant in terms of Beckett, and then doing the same thing with the whole chunk of text that I had. So I was gonna I'm gonna try and repeat what went on. If this was a text that I had. Okay, so the first thing I did, I had a bunch of text, and what I did in trying to follow what happened here, the moves that were made, or yeah, I like folded it in half, but I more just like ripped it in half. That wasn't half. So anyways, I had this, and then what I did for both was, this was everything that I did with these two diagrams, but you can't really tell. Then I did this, and then like, I was doing all of this like regardless of what was actually being said. I didn't really care to preserve any type of integrity in what it meant. And then I took one side and, did I do that? I'm splitting it now, but I actually doubled it, so I don't know what to do about that. Okay, and then after I did that, I like was trying to somehow realize that 45-degree to 46-degree thing with text on a two-dimensional space. And I didn't really know what to do with that. So I just like simply shifted things over like this, and then I shifted the bottom half like just a little, so it was like kind of turned or whatever. Yeah. And then after that, I don't really know how to explain this with this piece of paper, because the reflections I was doing on the screen, like I can do this, but I can't really do that on the computer because there's no space for it to go into and then come up. Like I couldn't figure out a way to do that with what I was doing. So after that, I just had a bunch of weird literal like, I tried to reflect. So when I tried to reflect on the system that I had, what I actually ended up doing was more like if this were the text, I really just did this because I had no way of figuring it out. So it was just like you get overlapping or palimpsest, I think it's called, with the text. So yeah. And after that, I kept on doing things with the more and more steps I made. It was just really crazy. What it looked like it wouldn't matter if I told you what I did because it's not going to look like anything. It's not going to look like that. So yeah. Before I like make this available for people to see, really, a lot of problems I ran into were like the first thing I said, like I didn't know how to deal with reflecting text on a two-dimensional space, like because there was nothing to dip, there was no depth, like so I had to deal with that in some way, and how I dealt with it was actually kind of interesting, I guess. And then I guess another thing that I already kind of mentioned this before, but a matter of if I were to take two like pretty, Deleuze discusses this all the time, but when you have a relationship between anything, any objects, in this case these were texts, an issue is how to deal with them so that you're not just like representing one or lazily just like putting one on top of the other, stuff like that, and or tracing in other words. And there has to be some type of meaningful interaction with two objects where you're not just subordinating one to the other. That's what I was really concerned with doing, and I'm not quite sure if I did it, but yeah. Also, another weird thing is, I don't know if anybody's thought about this, but I was thinking about this, and I realized that like a map, if you think about the concept of a map in like Deleuze's terms, it can't be originary. Like the first map has to be a trace. So I don't know what to do with that, but I was like, oh, and then I just continued. And then I guess another thing that was interesting for me was there was like a double layer of comprehension you have to do while looking at this. Because the words mean something, but quickly it's not that they don't, it's just that you can't figure out what they mean because of the transformations made. So there was on like a signifying level, like you reading the sentence like this, but then at the same time, you had to track the formal changes that were going on in a really, I don't know, like accelerated type of way, because change is happening pretty quickly, as you can see. And then another thing is also that I didn't know whether to think of this as a visual art piece or as poetry, because for like the same reasons I just said, like you can kind of understand it but not really, and I don't really know how to read it. And also, like, another thing too is you do have to advance from a start to an end. You can't just look at the whole thing because it's really long and you have to scroll through it. So yeah. And then another problem I also had was thinking about how certain processes relate to one another. So an interesting thing I found specifically with analyzing the Bach was that the analysis in relation to transcription, translation, and then arrangement, like there's some type of relationship between those two things that I don't quite know what to do with. So I went into the Bach looking to analyze it and nothing more. I wasn't looking to transcribe anything, but in trying to analyze it, I ended up more or less with a transcription. I think I could give this to somebody who knew how to play piano. They could play it without seeing the notes on the page, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, the only other thing, I'm gonna like try and read some of this, but yeah, I'll just do that right now. I guess a fun fact is that after I finished doing this, it like crashed Google Docs, so I don't know what that means. Okay, I think I'm just going to read like 3 or 4 excerpts until I can't read anymore. The last couple of pages I don't know how to really read. So, yeah. Flight from imposition, its sovereign operations, which keeps... It must cancel all and homogen simulations of their sovereignty. Wherever sovereignty is consciousness, that thwarted wherever it is unsettled, everywhere, all the time, and entangled in manifold ways, it must regard its manifold ways, eventually come to be divided up and placing them in danger, such that the difference between absolute, all in homogeneous unity, egal. Okay, that's one excerpt. Okay. Quote 8. The tantric egg, after all, is not the philosophical. Therein, Spinoza's Ethics, the great book of the temporal remit, informed by of the who is time, what to essence, who to, aka how temporal of the is unfairly prejudges time / pre its validity, 2 relies on time as of presence, but establishes an groundless ground of / running ahead of itself towards it. Question mark 3. Structural, where tracking the consequences of simply from the what. This is going to be a bit where it's some of the Bach I was analyzing. Let's see. As the intense eggzation Neapolitan 4, 5, 1, 1, I, vectors, gradients, and in the 1, 1, 1, 1, I, 1, tendencies involving presence, I, 1, and phenomena 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and kinematic movements, illogical, or tritone, nothing else but from displacement by presencing G to D, D C sharp number, or pound, or hashtag / D to D, to migrations, all, Ng itself, dash 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 G, E / D, D, E, D over C, C sharp, diminished, or degree, forms because the must be starting measure 152. I have one last excerpt I'm going to try and read. Okay. Enigma. Of the others. Desire, no. Longer, etc., etc. I guess that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions or concerns or you're just angry or something. But or you want to talk about any of these people? I think one thing I just learned from just reading that is like you aren't taught how to read white space on a page when you're taught reading, so I have no idea of how to measure the same distance in time with reading a thing. So I guess I should learn how to do that, but like I had no idea how to. I guess I could like tap my foot, but that's kind of lame. So yeah, does anybody have any questions or concerns? I'm gonna leave this here. Like you could just like scroll through it. And I guess I could email it to you if you want a copy of it to deal with this, like an 80-page document. So I didn't read the whole thing. But yeah, if you just like write your email down on this piece of paper and just leave it here, I can email it to you. But that's all I have for today.